The gunshot echoed across the valley, startling Abigail Foster from her restless sleep. She bolted upright in the dilapidated wagon, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild Mustang. Dawn had barely broken over the horizon, painting the Montana territory in hues of amber and gold. It was 1875, and Abigail had nothing left but the clothes on her back, a handful of coins, and a determination that burned hotter than the summer sun. The second gunshot confirmed what she already knew: trouble was brewing in the small town of Copper Creek, just beyond the ridge. Gathering her few possessions, Abigail smoothed down her travel-worn dress and pinned her auburn hair into a practical bun. Her wagon wheel had broken the previous evening, leaving her stranded just outside of town. Providence, perhaps, or merely coincidence. "Just keep moving forward," she whispered to herself, the mantra that had carried her through the 2,000 miles from Boston after her parents' death from influenza and the subsequent loss of their home to creditors. The walk into Copper Creek took less than 20 minutes. The town was exactly what she expected: a dusty main street lined with wooden buildings, a saloon already alive with morning drinkers, a general store, and a sheriff's office where a small crowd had gathered. At the center of the commotion stood a tall man with a sheriff's badge pinned to his chest, standing over a body sprawled in the dirt. "That's the third robbery attempt this month," a woman nearby commented, clutching her market basket. "Ever since the silver mine opened up, every outlaw between here and Kansas City's been trying their luck." Abigail adjusted her small bag of belongings and continued down the street. She needed work immediately. The last of her money would barely buy a decent meal, let alone secure lodging. As she passed the general store, a notice in the window caught her eye. "Housekeeper wanted inquire at Thornhill Ranch, 3 miles north." It wasn't what she had envisioned when she'd set out west with dreams of teaching or perhaps working in a respectable establishment. But beggars couldn't be choosers. With renewed purpose, Abigail approached a young boy leading a donkey. "Excuse me," she said, offering her most polite smile. "Could you direct me to Thornhill Ranch?" The boy looked her up and down, curious about the well-spoken stranger. "Follow the north road past the creek. You can't miss it. Big white house on the hill with the windmill. That's Mr. Thornhill's place." He hesitated before adding, "You the new housekeeper?" "I hope to be," Abigail replied. The boy shrugged. "Good luck. He's gone through 3 this year already." With that encouraging news, Abigail began the 3-mile trek north of town. The Montana landscape stretched endlessly before her, rolling hills carpeted with grass, majestic mountains in the distance, and a sky so vast it made her feel smaller than she already was. The beauty was undeniable, but beauty wouldn't fill her empty stomach or provide a roof over her head. By mid-morning, Thornhill Ranch came into view, just as the boy had described. A substantial 2-story white house stood proudly on a gentle rise, a stark contrast to the modest town buildings. A large barn, corral, and several outbuildings completed the property, while cattle dotted the surrounding pastures. Clearly, Mr. Thornhill was prosperous. As Abigail approached the house, she noticed a man on horseback riding in from the opposite direction. He wore a dark Stetson pulled low over his eyes, a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up revealing sun-bronzed forearms, and dusty riding chaps. He guided his chestnut stallion with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent his life in the saddle. The man reached the house just as Abigail did, dismounting with fluid grace. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30, with a strong jawline shadowed with stubble and eyes the color of the Montana sky. "Can I help you, madam?" he asked, his voice deep but not unkind. Abigail squared her shoulders. "I've come about the housekeeper position. I saw the notice in town." The man's eyes traveled from her face to her worn shoes and back again, assessing. "You don't look like a housekeeper." "I can assure you, sir, I am more than capable," she replied with dignity, refusing to be intimidated despite her circumstances. I can clean, cook, sew, and manage a household efficiently. A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips. And what brings a lady with your educated speech all the way out here to clean my house? Circumstances change, sir. Are you Mr. Thornhill? He nodded, removing his hat to reveal dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. Zachary Thornhill, and you are… Abigail Foster. Well, Miss Foster, I'm afraid before he could continue, a commotion from the barn interrupted him. A ranch hand came running, waving frantically. Mr. Thornhill, that new stallion's gone wild again. He's about to kick down the stall. Zachary Thornhill cursed under his breath. Excuse me, Miss Foster. We'll continue this conversation shortly. He turned and strode toward the barn, calling over his shoulder. Wait on the porch if you'd like. Abigail stood uncertainly for a moment before making her way to the porch. She sat on a wooden bench, grateful for the chance to rest her weary feet. From her vantage point, she could see into the barn where Zachary and his ranch hands were attempting to calm a magnificent black stallion that reared and kicked against its confines. Zachary's approach was cautious but confident. He spoke softly to the animal, one hand extended. The horse seemed to respond, quieting momentarily before spooking again when one of the hands moved too quickly. The stallion's hoof caught Zachary's shoulder, sending him stumbling backward. Abigail gasped, rising to her feet, but he quickly recovered, waving off assistance from the others. After nearly 30 minutes, the situation was under control. Zachary emerged from the barn, his shirt torn at the shoulder and a thin line of blood visible through the fabric. He approached the porch, wiping his brow with a handkerchief. My apologies for the interruption, Miss Foster. You're injured, she said, gesturing to his shoulder. He glanced down dismissively. It's nothing. Now, about the position, I can clean your house, Abigail stated firmly, cutting him off. She needed this job desperately. I can start immediately. Zachary studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he said, I'd rather you stay and fill it. Abigail blinked, certain she'd misheard. I'm sorry. The house, he clarified, gesturing toward the door. It needs more than cleaning, it needs… He hesitated, searching for the right word. Life. My sister kept this place when she was alive. Since she passed last winter, it's just been me and a succession of housekeepers who can't seem to manage more than a few weeks. Abigail frowned, confused by his unexpected response. I don't understand what you're asking of me, Mr. Thornhill, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'm offering you the position of housekeeper, Miss Foster, but I'm hoping you'll be more than that. This place needs someone who can make it a home again, someone who'll stay. His eyes met hers directly. The last 3 quit because they claimed the house was too big, too empty. I don't need someone who'll just dust the furniture. I need someone who'll make this place worth coming back to at the end of the day. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. I see, she said slowly. And what would the terms of employment be? Room and board, plus $30 a month. When he saw her eyes widen at the generous sum, he added, the work isn't easy. Besides the house, you'd need to cook for me and occasionally for the ranch hands when they're working close to the house. Laundry, mending, and keeping a kitchen garden would also be your responsibility. $30 a month was more than she'd dared hope for. She could save, perhaps eventually open the school she'd dreamed of. When would you like me to start? Immediately, if you're willing. I can send someone to collect your belongings from town. That won't be necessary, she replied, gesturing to her small bag. This is all I have. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or concern, but he masked it quickly. Then I'll show you to your quarters. He led her into the house, and Abigail immediately understood what he meant about needing more than cleaning. While the structure was impressive high ceilings, hardwood floors, quality furnishings, it felt hollow, unlived in. A fine layer of dust covered most surfaces, books and papers were scattered haphazardly, and the kitchen showed signs of bachelor living with unwashed dishes piled in the sink. My sister, Elizabeth, passed away last winter, Zachary explained as they climbed the stairs. Pneumonia. She managed the house while I ran the ranch. I've been. He hesitated, struggling to maintain both. Abigail nodded, understanding dawning. I'm sorry for your loss. The ranch hands bunk in the quarters behind the barn. I have a foreman, Hank Davis, who oversees them. You'll meet them all at supper. He showed her to a pleasant room at the back of the house with a comfortable bed, dresser, washstand, and a small window overlooking the mountains. This will be your room. The kitchen is fully stocked, or should be. Mrs. Peterson from town delivers supplies weekly. Thank you, Mr. Thornhill. I'll start on the kitchen right away. He nodded, seeming relieved. I'll be out with the herd until sundown. The men usually eat around 7. After he left, Abigail stood in the middle of her new room, trying to process the sudden turn of events. Yesterday, she had been sleeping in a broken-down wagon, wondering how she would survive. Today, she had employment, shelter, and the promise of a fresh start. She unpacked her meager belongings: 2 dresses, undergarments, a hairbrush, a small Bible that had belonged to her mother, and a daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. After washing her face and hands in the basin provided, she set to work. The kitchen became her first battleground. She rolled up her sleeves and tackled the mountain of dishes, scrubbed the stovetop until it gleamed, and swept the floors. She found ingredients for a hearty stew, fresh bread, and apple pie, assuming correctly that men who worked from sunrise to sunset would appreciate substantial fare. By the time the ranch hands began filing into the kitchen, 7 strong and ravenous from their day's labor, Abigail had transformed the chaos into order. The table was set, the stew was bubbling, and the scent of fresh bread filled the air. Hank Davis, the foreman, was the first to notice her. A man in his 50s with gray streaked hair and kind eyes, he removed his hat and nodded respectfully. You must be the new housekeeper. I'm Hank Davis. Abigail Foster, she replied, gesturing to the table. Dinner is ready if you gentlemen would like to be seated. The men exchanged glances, clearly surprised by the transformation of both kitchen and meal. They introduced themselves one by one as they took their seats. Hank, followed by Tom, Charlie, Mexican Joe, Will, Jasper, and young Jimmy, who couldn't have been more than 16. This is a far sight better than what we've been eating, Charlie commented as he filled his bowl with stew. You can thank the boss for shooting that last woman out of here, Tom added with a chuckle. Couldn't boil water without burning it. Mr. Thornhill fired the previous housekeeper. Abigail asked, serving bread. Hank shook his head. Not exactly. She quit after he suggested her cooking might improve if she paid attention to what she was doing instead of trying to catch his eye all the time. The men laughed, and Abigail found herself smiling despite her fatigue. These were good men, hardworking and straightforward. The boss has had a rough go of it since Miss Elizabeth passed, Hank continued, his tone more serious. Those 2 were thick as thieves. He took it hard. Before Abigail could respond, the back door opened and Zachary Thornhill entered, his tall frame filling the doorway. The kitchen fell silent as he surveyed the scene: the clean kitchen, the hot meal, his men seated around the table with satisfied expressions. His eyes found Abigail's, and something unspoken passed between them. Miss Foster, he said with a nod, taking the empty seat at the head of the table. It appears you've been busy. Just fulfilling my duties, Mr. Thornhill. The men dug into their food with enthusiasm, and Abigail was pleased to see Zachary do the same, though with more restraint. She noticed he'd changed his shirt and tended to the cut on his shoulder. How's that stallion doing, boss? Jasper asked between bites. Settled for now. He's got spirit, just needs to learn who's in charge. Like someone else I know, Hank muttered with a pointed look at Zachary, who ignored the comment. After dinner, the men thanked Abigail and filed out, leaving her alone with Zachary. He remained seated, watching as she cleared the dishes. You don't have to do that now, he said. You must be tired. I prefer to finish what I've started, she replied, continuing her work. He nodded, understanding. The meal was excellent, better than anything we've had in months. Thank you. Where did you learn to cook like that? Abigail hesitated, not wanting to reveal too much about her past. My mother taught me. She believed every woman should know how to manage a household, regardless of her station. And what was your station, Miss Foster? His question was direct but not unkind. She met his gaze steadily. My father was a lawyer in Boston. When he and my mother died last year, I discovered his practice was deeply in debt. I had to sell everything to pay his creditors. I'm sorry, he said quietly. And what brought you west? A chance for a new beginning, she answered simply. What about you, mister? Thornhill, have you always lived in Montana Territory? He leaned back in his chair. No, I came out here after the war 1866, bought this land when it was nothing but grass and sky, built it up piece by piece. The war between the states. She couldn't help her curiosity. You fought. A shadow crossed his face. Union cavalry, 4 years that felt like 40. He stood abruptly, clearly unwilling to discuss it further. I have ledgers to review. Don't stay up too late, Miss Foster. Tomorrow comes early on a ranch. With that, he left her alone in the kitchen. Abigail finished the dishes, thinking about the complex man who was now her employer. There was more to Zachary Thornhill than met the eye pain that ran deeper than the loss of his sister, she suspected. As she climbed the stairs to her room later that night, exhaustion finally overtaking her, Abigail paused at a partially open door. Curiosity got the better of her, and she peered inside. It was clearly Zachary's study. A large desk dominated the room, covered with papers and ledgers. A bookshelf lined one wall, filled with volumes on ranching, animal husbandry, and to her surprise, several classics of literature. Zachary himself sat at the desk, a lamp burning low beside him as he pored over what appeared to be financial records. The lamplight softened his features, and for a moment he looked younger, less guarded. As if sensing her presence, he looked up suddenly, catching her watching him. Is there something you need, Miss Foster? His voice betrayed no anger at her intrusion, only mild curiosity. No, I apologize for disturbing you, she said quickly. I was just heading to my room, he nodded, returning to his work. Good night, then. Good night, Mr. Thornhill. As Abigail continued to her room, she wondered what she had gotten herself into. Zachary Thornhill was an enigma, a hard-working rancher, with the education of a gentleman. A Civil War veteran carving out a new life in the wilderness. A man who claimed to want his house filled with life, yet seemed to hold himself apart from it. Whatever his complexities, one thing was certain: Thornhill Ranch offered her sanctuary when she needed it most. For that alone, she owed him her best efforts. The rest, she decided as sleep claimed her, would sort itself out in time. Morning came early at Thornhill Ranch, just as Zachary had warned. Abigail woke before sunrise, quickly dressed, and made her way to the kitchen. To her surprise, Zachary was already there, coffee brewing on the stove. Good morning, he said, glancing up from the cup he was filling. I hope you slept well. I did, thank you. She moved to the stove, assessing what she needed to prepare. Do the men usually eat breakfast here or in the bunkhouse? In the bunkhouse mostly. Hank sees to it. He took a sip of his coffee. I generally just have coffee and maybe some bread before heading out. That hardly seems sufficient for the work you do, Abigail commented, already reaching for eggs and bacon. A proper breakfast won't take but a few minutes. A faint smile touched his lips. Are you always this determined, Miss Foster? When it comes to proper nutrition, yes, she replied, cracking eggs into a bowl. My father always said breakfast was the foundation of the day. Your father sounds like a wise man. Abigail's hands stilled momentarily. He was. While she prepared breakfast, Zachary sat at the table reviewing a list he'd made. I'll be riding the north pasture today, he said, more to himself than to her. Need to check that fencing before moving the herd. Will you be back for dinner? He looked up, seeming surprised by the question. Yes, I expect so. Why? So I know how much to prepare, she explained practically. And whether to keep a plate warm for you. Something flickered in his eyes' appreciation, perhaps. Yes, I'll be back. Thank you for asking. She set a plate before him, eggs, bacon, and fresh bread she'd found in the pantry. Eat while it's hot, Mr. Thornhill. He did as instructed, and Abigail was pleased to see him clear the plate with obvious enjoyment. As he finished, he asked, "What are your plans for today?" "I thought I'd start with a thorough cleaning of the main rooms," she replied. "The parlor especially needs attention." He nodded, rising from the table. "There's a chest in the attic with some of Elizabeth's things, linens, curtains, that sort of thing. You're welcome to use whatever you need." "Thank you, I will." He hesitated at the door, seeming to want to say something more. Finally, he simply nodded again and left. Abigail spent the morning attacking the accumulated dust and disorder of the main floor. She found the chest Zachary had mentioned, filled with quality linens, curtains, and tablecloths. Elizabeth Thornhill had clearly been a woman of taste and means. By mid-afternoon, Abigail had transformed the parlor from a neglected space to a welcoming room. Fresh curtains hung at the windows, furniture gleamed with polish, and she'd arranged a vase of wildflowers on the side table. She was standing back to admire her work when a knock came at the front door. Opening it, she found a woman in her 40s with a friendly face and a wagon full of supplies behind her. "You must be the new housekeeper," the woman said, extending her hand. "I'm Margaret Peterson. I bring supplies out to the ranch every week." "Abigail Foster, please come in." As they unloaded the supplies, Margaret proved to be a fountain of information about Copper Creek and its inhabitants. "So you've taken on Zachary Thornhill's household," she said, helping Abigail arrange jars in the pantry. "Brave woman." "He seems fair enough as an employer," Abigail replied cautiously. Margaret nodded. "Oh, he's fair and generous too. It's just that he's not an easy man to work for, not since Elizabeth died anyway. Those two were all each other had after their parents passed. She ran the house, kept him civilized. Without her," she shrugged. "Well, you've seen the state of things. Did you know her well?" Abigail asked, curious about the woman whose absence seemed to haunt the house. Everyone knew Elizabeth. She was involved in everything: church socials, school fundraisers, caring for the sick. When she caught pneumonia last winter, the whole town tried to save her. Margaret's voice softened. Zachary didn't leave her side for 3 days straight. When she passed, something in him changed. He withdrew, focused entirely on the ranch. Abigail absorbed this information thoughtfully. "He mentioned he fought in the war." Margaret nodded. "Cavalry officer, came back different from what I heard. Elizabeth was the only one who could reach him when the memories got bad." She paused, then added more cheerfully, "But he's a good man underneath it all. The best rancher in the territory and fair with his men. He just needs—" She searched for the right word. "Someone to fill his house," Abigail suggested quietly. Margaret looked at her sharply. "That's an interesting way of putting it. Is that what he told you?" Before Abigail could respond, the back door opened and Hank Davis entered. "Afternoon, ladies," he said, removing his hat. "Miss Foster, the boss asked me to let you know he's been delayed. There's a section of fence down, and he'll be working late to repair it." "Thank you, Mr. Davis. I'll keep dinner warm for him." After Hank left, Margaret gave Abigail a knowing look. "That's a first. Usually, he doesn't bother to send word when he'll be late." Abigail ignored the implication. "I should get back to work if dinner is to be ready on time." Margaret took the hint and prepared to leave. "It was lovely meeting you, Abigail. I hope you'll last longer than the others." Alone again, Abigail pondered Margaret's words as she prepared dinner. The meal for the ranch hands went smoothly, though Zachary's absence was noted. After they left, she kept a plate warm for him as promised and continued her cleaning in the dining room. It was well past 9 when she heard the front door open. Abigail emerged from the dining room to find Zachary removing his hat and coat in the entryway. He looked exhausted, his face drawn, clothes mud splattered. "You're still up," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I kept dinner warm for you," she replied simply. It's in the oven. He followed her to the kitchen, where she set the plate before him. Thank you, he said, the words weighted with more gratitude than the simple gesture seemed to warrant. You didn't have to wait up. I wanted to finish in the dining room anyway, she said, pouring him coffee. How is the fence? Repaired, for now. He ate hungrily, and Abigail busied herself with tidying the already clean counters to give him privacy. You've made quite a difference already, he commented after a while, gesturing vaguely toward the parlor. The house feels different. I hope that's a good thing. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It is. They fell into a comfortable silence as he finished his meal. When he was done, he rose to take his plate to the sink, but Abigail intercepted him. I'll take care of that. You look dead on your feet, Mr. Thornhill. He didn't argue, which told her just how tired he truly was. Good night, Miss Foster, and thank you again. As Abigail watched him climb the stairs, she felt an unexpected tug of sympathy. Margaret's words echoed in her mind a good man who had lost his anchor, who was struggling to find his way forward alone. She recognized the pattern all too well from her own grief. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Abigail rose early each morning to prepare breakfast for Zachary before he headed out to work the ranch. She spent her days cleaning, cooking, mending, and slowly bringing order and warmth back to the Thornhill home. In the evenings, she served dinner to the ranch hands and later to Zachary when he returned from the fields. Little by little, she learned more about the man who employed her. He was well-read, often retiring to his study in the evenings with books ranging from agricultural journals to poetry. He was fair but firm with his men, earning their respect through hard work rather than harsh words. And despite his initial gruffness, he showed flashes of unexpected kindness, bringing her wildflowers for the table when he rode in from the range, or having Hank bring back fabric from town when he noticed her dresses were becoming threadbare. For his part, Zachary seemed to be slowly emerging from the shell of grief that had encased him. He began lingering at the breakfast table to discuss his plans for the day. At dinner, he asked questions about hers. Occasionally, he even smiled, a transformation that lit his features and made Abigail's heart beat a little faster each time she witnessed it. One evening in mid-June, nearly a month after Abigail's arrival, a thunderstorm rolled in from the mountains. The sky darkened prematurely, and thunder rumbled ominously as she prepared dinner. The ranch hands had returned early, and even Zachary came in before his usual time, his expression tense as he studied the approaching storm. It's going to be a bad one, he told Hank. Check that the horses are secure, and make sure the new calves are in the lower barn with their mothers. Dinner was a hurried affair, with the men eager to secure everything before the storm hit in earnest. As they filed out, Zachary lingered. Will you be all right here? He asked Abigail. These Montana storms can be fierce. I'll be fine, she assured him. Are you going back out? He nodded, already pulling on his slicker. Need to check the creek. If it floods, we could lose part of the herd. The worry must have shown on her face, for he added, I won't be long. Stay inside, away from the windows. The storm hit with full force shortly after he left. Rain lashed against the windows, and lightning split the sky in jagged bursts that illuminated the house in brief, ghostly flashes. Thunder boomed continuously, rattling the dishes in the cupboards. Abigail tried to focus on her mending, but her thoughts kept straying to Zachary out in the deluge. An hour passed, then two, with no sign of him. The rational part of her knew he was experienced, that he knew this land and its dangers. The irrational part, the part that had grown increasingly fond of him over the past month, imagined him injured, or worse. When the back door finally burst open, she nearly dropped her sewing in relief. Zachary stood in the doorway, drenched to the skin despite his slicker, mud up to his knees. The creek's rising, he said without preamble, stripping off his wet coat. Had to move the herd to higher ground. Are you all right? She asked, hurrying to take his coat. Fine, cold and wet, but fine. A violent shiver belied his words. You need to get dry before you catch your death, Abigail said firmly. I'll stoke the fire in the parlor and bring you something hot to drink. To her surprise, he didn't argue. By the time she returned with coffee laced with whiskey, he had changed into dry clothes and was sitting before the fire, his hair still damp. Thank you, he said, accepting the mug gratefully. You didn't have to wait up. I wouldn't have slept anyway, she admitted, settling into the chair opposite his. Not with the storm. They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the rain and the crackling fire. The warmth and whiskey gradually brought color back to Zachary's face, and his rigid posture began to relax. This reminds me of nights during the war, he said suddenly, his gaze fixed on the flames. When it rained and we found shelter, there was this momentary peace. Like the world had stopped to catch its breath. Abigail remained quiet, sensing he needed to speak more than he needed a response. I was 20 when I enlisted, he continued. Full of patriotic fervor and notions of glory, by 22 I'd seen enough death to last several lifetimes. He took a long drink. When it was over, I couldn't go back to Illinois. Everything felt too small, too confined. I needed space, endless horizons. Is that why you came to Montana? He nodded. Elizabeth was teaching school in Chicago. Our parents had passed years before. When I wrote to her about my plans, she surprised me by insisting on coming too. A fond smile touched his lips. She was always the brave one, really. I just wore the uniform. She sounds remarkable. She was. His voice caught slightly. She made this place a home after she died. He gestured vaguely. I let it all go, couldn't see the point. And now, Abigail asked softly, his eyes met hers, intense and searching. Now I'm beginning to remember. The air between them seemed to charge with something unspoken. Abigail felt her cheeks flush, and she looked away first. I should let you rest, she said, rising from her chair. It's been a long day. Zachary stood as well, his tall frame illuminated by the firelight. Abigail, he said, using her given name for the first time. Thank you, not just for tonight, but for everything you've done here. The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. You're welcome, Zachary. His name felt right on her lips, as if she'd been waiting to say it all along. With a final nod, she left him by the fire and climbed the stairs to her room, her mind replaying the moment again and again, until sleep finally claimed her. The following morning dawned clear and bright, as if the storm had never happened. The only evidence was the muddy ground and the swollen creek visible in the distance. Abigail rose early as usual and was surprised to find Zachary already in the kitchen, attempting to start breakfast himself. Good morning, she said, trying not to smile at his obvious awkwardness with the stove. I see you've decided to take over my duties. He looked up, a rueful expression on his face. I thought I'd let you sleep in after last night, though I'm quickly remembering why I usually just stick to coffee. Abigail laughed and gently moved him aside. Your consideration is appreciated, but perhaps it's best if I handle the cooking. He relinquished his position willingly. No argument here. As she prepared breakfast, Zachary set the table another first. The easy domesticity of the scene wasn't lost on either of them, and Abigail found herself wondering if this was what it would be like to be truly at home here, not just as an employee. I need to ride into town today, Zachary said, as they ate. Check on supplies, see if the storm caused any damage. Would you like to come along? You haven't had a day away from the ranch since you arrived. The invitation surprised her. Are you sure? There's still so much to do here. The house won't fall apart if you take one day off, he assured her. Besides, I believe you're entitled to some time for yourself. The idea of spending a day in town, and specifically, spending it in Zachary's company, was too tempting to refuse. In that case, I'd be delighted. They set out after breakfast, riding side by side in the wagon. Zachary pointed out features of his land as they traveled where he planned to expand the grazing area, the stand of trees that provided the best shade for the cattle in summer, the hill where wildflowers bloomed most profusely in spring. You love this land, Abigail observed. He nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. It's become part of me. I can't imagine being anywhere else now. In town, Zachary had business at the bank and the mercantile, while Abigail took the opportunity to explore Copper Creek properly. The town was small but growing, with the silver mine providing steady employment and attracting new settlers. She visited the general store, where Margaret Peterson greeted her warmly, and paused outside the small schoolhouse, peering through the windows at the empty classroom. "Were you a teacher before?" Zachary's voice came from behind her, startling her slightly. "No," she admitted, "but I wanted to be. I was studying for my teaching certificate when my parents died." He studied her thoughtfully. "Copper Creek could use another teacher, Mrs. Holloway can barely keep up with all the new families moving in." Hope fluttered in Abigail's chest. "Do you really think so?" "I know so. I'm on the town council," he said with a small smile. "If you're interested, I could speak to the others." The offer was unexpected and generous. I would be interested, very much so. But what about your household?" "We could work something out," he said, his tone casual though his eyes were intent. "Perhaps you could teach during the day and manage the house in the evenings, or we could hire additional help." Before Abigail could respond, a commotion down the street drew their attention. A group of men had emerged from the saloon, their voices raised in argument. One man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a flash of red hair, seemed to be the focus of the dispute. "Stay here," Zachary said quietly, his posture suddenly alert. He moved toward the disturbance, his hand resting near his holstered pistol. Abigail watched as he approached the group, speaking calmly but firmly. The red-haired man turned, and even from a distance, she could see his belligerent expression. Words were exchanged, too low for her to hear, and for a moment she feared violence would erupt. Then, surprisingly, the tension seemed to dissipate. The men dispersed, with the red-haired stranger shooting one last dark look at Zachary before stalking away. "What was that about?" Abigail asked when Zachary returned to her side. "Trouble," he said grimly. "That was Wade Callahan, used to run with the Sullivan gang out of Wyoming. Supposed to have gone straight, but I don't trust him. What's he doing in Copper Creek? Claims he's looking for honest work at the mine." Zachary's expression was skeptical. "I think we should head back to the ranch." The mood on the return journey was notably different. Zachary vigilant and preoccupied, scanning the trail ahead with frequent glances behind them. "Do you think he followed us?" Abigail asked, picking up on his concern. "No, but it's better to be cautious. Callahan has a reputation for holding grudges, and I once testified against his brother in a rustling case." He glanced at her apologetically. "I'm sorry our day in town was cut short." "Don't be. It was lovely just to get away for a while." She hesitated, then added, "And thank you for offering to speak to the school board. It means a great deal to me." His expression softened. "You'd make an excellent teacher, Abigail. Anyone can see that." The way he said her name sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the summer sun. They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. That evening, after dinner had been served and the kitchen cleaned, Abigail found herself restless. The house was quiet, with Zachary in his study as usual. On impulse, she selected a book from the parlor shelf, a volume of Tennyson's poetry, and made her way to the front porch. The evening was mild, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of sage and pine from the surrounding hills. She had been reading for perhaps half an hour when the door opened behind her. Zachary emerged, a look of mild surprise on his face. "I didn't know you were out here," he said. "I thought I'd get some air before turning in." "Would you prefer to be alone?" she asked, preparing to rise. "Not at all." He settled into the chair beside hers. "What are you reading?" She showed him the cover. "I hope you don't mind. I saw it on your shelf and couldn't resist." "Elizabeth's favorite," he said, a fond smile touching his lips. "She used to read it aloud on evenings like this." "She had excellent taste. She would have liked you," he said suddenly. "Very much, I think." The simple statement touched Abigail deeply. "I wish I could have known her." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the distant lowing of cattle and the chorus of night insects. "Would you read something?" Zachary asked eventually. "I haven't heard those poems in a long time." Abigail nodded, turning to a familiar passage from Ulysses. Her voice was clear and steady as she read. "I am a part of all that I have met, yet all experience is an arch wherethrough gleams that untraveled world whose margin fades forever and forever when I move." She continued through the poem, aware of Zachary's intent gaze upon her. When she finished, the words seemed to hang in the air between them, charged with meaning. "To strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield," Zachary quoted the final line softly. "I carried those words with me through the war." "They're powerful," Abigail agreed. "A reminder that we're shaped by our experiences but not defined by them." He looked at her with newfound appreciation. "Exactly. Most people miss that part. They focus on the adventure, not the growth. Perhaps because growth is harder to see from the outside," she suggested. "It's a private journey. You're a surprising woman, Abigail Foster," she smiled, closing the book. "In what way?" "In every way that matters." His voice was low, intimate in the gathering darkness. "You came here with nothing but your courage and determination. In a month, you've transformed not just this house, but—" He trailed off, but Abigail could finish the thought. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken feelings. For a breathless moment, she thought he might reach for her hand or perhaps say more. Instead, he stood suddenly. "It's getting late. We should both get some rest." The moment broken, Abigail rose as well. "Of course. Good night, Zachary." "Good night, Abigail." As she climbed the stairs to her room, Abigail's mind whirled with confusion. Had she imagined the connection between them? Was she foolish to think that Zachary might see her as more than just his housekeeper? And even if he did, what future could there be for them? She had come to Thornhill Ranch desperate for work, with nothing to offer but her labor. He was a successful rancher, respected in the community. The disparity in their positions seemed insurmountable. Yet, as she prepared for bed, Abigail couldn't shake the memory of his eyes in the lamplight, or the way her name sounded in his deep voice. Something was changing between them, something neither had anticipated, when she first appeared on his doorstep offering to clean his house. The following morning brought an unexpected visit from Sheriff Thomas Blake. Abigail was kneading dough for the day's bread when Hank showed the lawman into the kitchen. "Morning, Miss Foster," the sheriff said, removing his hat. "Is the boss around?" "He's checking the north pasture," Abigail replied. "Is something wrong?" The sheriff's expression was grave. "Could be. Wade Callahan's been asking questions about Thornhill Ranch, how many men work here, where the property lines run, that sort of thing." Abigail's hands stilled in the dough. "Why would he want to know that?" "That's what concerns me. Callahan claims he's looking for work, but I've got word from the Wyoming Territory that he's still running with a rough crowd." He glanced toward the window. "How soon do you expect Mr. Thornhill back?" "Within the hour, I'd imagine." The sheriff nodded. "I'll wait, if that's all right." "This isn't something I want to discuss with just anyone." Abigail offered him coffee and freshly baked biscuits, which he accepted gratefully. As they waited, he asked about her background and how she came to be at Thornhill Ranch. "It seems to suit you," he observed. "Working here, I mean." "Thornhill's lucky to have found you." "I'm the fortunate one," Abigail replied honestly. "Mr. Thornhill gave me a chance when I desperately needed one." The sheriff studied her thoughtfully. "He's a good man, one of the best I know, been through more than his share of hardship, though." Before Abigail could respond, the back door opened and Zachary entered. He stopped short at the sight of Sheriff Blake. "Tom, what brings you out here?" The sheriff rose. "We need to talk, Zach, privately." Zachary's expression tightened, but he nodded. "My study." After the men left, Abigail tried to focus on her bread making, but her mind kept returning to Wade Callahan and what threat he might pose. When Zachary finally returned to the kitchen, his face was grim. "Is everything all right?" she asked, wiping flour from her hands. "No," he answered honestly. Tom believes Callahan and his associates may be planning to rustle cattle, possibly mine, given the questions he's been asking. What will you do? Double the watch on the herds, arm the men. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Abigail had come to recognize as a sign of stress. I don't want to alarm you, but you should be aware of the situation. If you see any strangers near the property, don't approach them. Find me or Hank immediately. The seriousness of his tone sent a chill through her. Do you think they would come to the house? I doubt it. Cattle rustlers typically avoid confrontation if they can. They're after the herds, not trouble. He hesitated, then added, but just to be safe, I'll show you where I keep a pistol in my desk. Do you know how to use one? My father taught me the basics, she admitted, though I've never had cause to fire one in earnest. Let's hope you never need to. His expression softened slightly. I don't mean to frighten you, Abigail. The sheriff may be overreacting, but I'd rather you be prepared. The concern in his eyes warmed her, despite the troubling news. I understand, and I'm not frightened, not when I know you and your men are looking out for the ranch. Something flickered in his gaze, appreciation, perhaps, or something deeper. We'll get through this, he said quietly. Together. The word hung between them, laden with meaning. Before either could say more, Hank appeared at the door. Boss, the sheriff's ready to leave. Says he needs a word before he goes. Zachary nodded. I'll be right there. After he left, Abigail returned to her bread making, her mind turning over this new development. She had come to love Thornhill Ranch in the short time she'd been there, not just the house she had worked so hard to restore, but the land itself, with its sweeping vistas and infinite sky. And if she was honest with herself, she had come to care deeply for its owner as well. The thought of anyone threatening this place, threatening Zachary, filled her with a resolve that surprised her. Whatever came, she would face it alongside him. This was her home now, too, in all the ways that mattered. The next few days passed in a state of heightened vigilance. Zachary doubled the night watch on the herds and sent riders to patrol the boundaries of his property. The ranch hands carried rifles with them, even for routine tasks, and Zachary himself seemed perpetually alert, his hand never far from his holstered pistol. Despite the tension, daily life continued. Abigail maintained her routine of cleaning, cooking, and gradually bringing warmth back to the house. On the third evening after the sheriff's visit, she was preparing dinner when she heard hoofbeats approaching at speed. Looking out the window, she saw Jasper riding hard toward the house, his expression urgent. Zachary emerged from the barn and intercepted him. Though Abigail couldn't hear their conversation, she could see Zachary's posture stiffen as Jasper reported whatever news he brought. After a brief exchange, Zachary nodded and Jasper rode off again at the same breakneck pace. When Zachary entered the kitchen, his face was set in hard lines. Riders have been spotted near the west boundary, he said without preamble. 4 men, heavily armed. Abigail's heart quickened. Callahan? Jasper couldn't be sure, but it seems likely. He moved to the cabinet where he kept his ammunition and began loading a rifle. I'm gathering the men. We're going to intercept them before they reach the herd. Be careful, she said softly, fear clutching at her throat. He paused, looking at her directly. I need you to bar the doors after I leave. Don't open them for anyone but me or one of our men. She nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. I will. Zachary hesitated, then stepped closer to her. Abigail, if anything happens, don't, she interrupted, unable to bear the thought. You'll come back safely. His expression softened, and he reached out to touch her cheek briefly. I'll do my best to make sure of it. The gesture, so unexpected and tender, left her speechless. Before she could respond, he was gone, striding toward the bunkhouse where the men were already gathering. Abigail watched from the window as Zachary and 6 of his ranch hands mounted up and rode west, their figures gradually disappearing into the gathering dusk. Only young Jimmy remained behind, positioned on the porch with a rifle across his lap to guard the house. Following Zachary's instructions, Abigail secured the doors and windows, then tried to busy herself with dinner preparations. She couldn't help glancing repeatedly toward the west, straining to hear any sound of gunfire or returning riders. An hour passed, then two. Darkness fell completely, and still no sign of Zachary or his men. Abigail paced the kitchen, too anxious to sit still. She had just decided to check on Jimmy when she heard the distant pop of gunfire. Her heart leaped into her throat. The shots were coming from the west, where Zachary had gone. She rushed to the window, but the night revealed nothing beyond the faint glow of the lamp on the porch where Jimmy stood alert, his rifle raised. More shots rang out, closer now. Then, suddenly, riders emerged from the darkness, not from the west, but from the north. 3 men, moving fast toward the house. "Jimmy?" Abigail called out in warning, but her voice was lost in the sound of more gunfire. She watched in horror as Jimmy crumpled to the porch floor. The riders dismounted quickly, 2 heading for the barn while the 3rd approached the house. Abigail's mind raced. Zachary and his men had been drawn west, away from the house, a diversion. The real threat was here now, and she was alone. Moving swiftly, she retrieved the pistol Zachary had shown her from his desk drawer. The weight of it was unfamiliar in her hand, but her father's instructions came back to her clearly. Steady grip, aim carefully, squeeze, don't pull. She positioned herself in the darkened parlor, where she could see the front door. The intruder tried the handle, found it locked, then moved to the window. The sound of breaking glass shattered the silence. Abigail's heart hammered against her ribs, but she held the pistol steady. As the man began to climb through the window, she stepped forward into the faint light from outside. "Stop right there," she commanded, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I'm armed." The intruder froze momentarily, then laughed. "Well, ain't this a surprise? Thornhill's got himself a lady defender." In the dim light, Abigail could make out red hair Wade Callahan. "Leave now," she said firmly, "or I'll shoot." "I don't think you will, darling," Callahan drawled, continuing his entry. "Nice ladies like you don't have the stomach for it." Abigail aimed at the floor near his feet and fired. The explosion was deafening in the confined space, and the bullet splintered the floorboard inches from Callahan's boot. "The next one won't miss," she promised, her hands steadier now. "What do you want?" Callahan had frozen again, reassessing her. "Just some compensation," he said, his voice harder now. "Thornhill cost my brother 5 years in prison. I figure he owes me." "So this isn't about cattle rustling?" "That's just a bonus," Callahan admitted. "I really came to burn this place to the ground. Starting with this fancy house he's so proud of." Cold fear gripped Abigail's heart. "You won't succeed. Mr. Thornhill and his men will be back any minute." Callahan laughed again. "No, they won't. My boys led them on a merry chase halfway to the mountains. By the time they figure out the trick, this place will be ashes." As if to emphasize his point, a glow began to emanate from the direction of the barn. His accomplices had started their work. "Now step aside, lady," Callahan demanded, drawing his own pistol. "I don't generally shoot women, but I will if you force my hand." Abigail knew she had only moments to decide. She could retreat, try to escape out the back, possibly save herself. Or she could stand her ground and protect the home that had come to mean so much to her, the home Zachary had asked her to fill with life. "No," she said firmly, raising the pistol again. "I won't let you destroy this place." Callahan's expression darkened. "Then you're a fool." He leveled his gun at her. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. As Callahan's finger tightened on the trigger, a thunderous crash came from behind him as the front door burst open. Zachary appeared, his own gun raised, expression murderous. "Drop it, Callahan," he shouted. Callahan spun, firing wildly. The bullet went wide, splintering the doorframe beside Zachary's head. Without hesitation, Zachary fired back. The shot struck Callahan in the shoulder, sending him staggering backward with a howl of pain. "Abigail." Zachary's voice was tight with concern as he kicked Callahan's fallen weapon away. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm fine," she assured him, lowering her pistol with shaking hands. "But Jimmy," Hank's tending to him, bullet just grazed his arm. Zachary secured Callahan with swift, efficient movements, binding his hands with his own bandana. The barn, his men were setting fire to it. Zachary's expression hardened further. They won't get far. My men are rounding them up now. As if on cue, shouts came from outside. The ranch hands had returned and were dealing with the remaining intruders. The glow from the barn diminished as they fought the fire. Zachary hauled Callahan to his feet. "You're finished," he told the outlaw coldly. "Attempted murder, arson, cattle rustling, that's enough to put you away for good." "This isn't over, Thornhill," Callahan spat, though his bravado was undercut by the pain evident in his voice. "Yes, it is." Zachary pushed him toward the door where Hank was waiting to take custody of him. "Sheriff Blake will be very interested to hear about your activities." Once Callahan was handed over to Hank, Zachary turned back to Abigail. Now that the immediate danger had passed, reaction set in. She found herself trembling, the pistol suddenly heavy in her hand. Zachary crossed the room in 2 strides and gently took the weapon from her. "It's over," he said softly, setting the gun aside. "You're safe now." Something in his voice, relief mingled with residual fear, broke through her composure. Tears welled in her eyes, and before she could stop herself, she stepped forward into his arms. He held her tightly, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other secure around her waist. "I thought I'd lost you," he murmured against her hair. "When I realized it was a diversion when I saw the smoke from the barn. I was so afraid," she admitted, her voice muffled against his chest. "Not for myself, but for you, for this place." He drew back slightly to look at her, his expression filled with wonder. "You stood your ground against an armed outlaw to protect my home?" "Our home," she corrected without thinking, then blushed as she realized what she'd said. Something shifted in Zachary's gaze, surprise giving way to a warmth that took her breath away. "Our home," he repeated softly. "Yes, I believe it is." Then, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. When she responded, rising on tiptoe to meet him more fully, the kiss deepened into something profound, a promise, a beginning. When they finally parted, both a little breathless, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," he confessed. "Why didn't you?" she asked, her hands still resting on his shoulders. "I didn't think I had the right." "You came here for employment, not to be courted by your employer." His expression grew serious. "I still don't have the right, not unless you want." "I do," she interrupted softly. "Very much." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after the longest night. "Then I have a confession to make, Abigail Foster. When you first arrived and said you could clean my house, I knew immediately that I wanted much more than that. I wanted you to stay, to fill it with your presence, your spirit. I just never imagined you might want the same." "I didn't at first," she admitted honestly. "I was just grateful for the work, for the sanctuary, but somewhere along the way, this place and you became more than that. You became home." He kissed her again, more urgently this time, his arms tightening around her as if he feared she might disappear if he let go. A discreet cough from the doorway eventually separated them. Hank stood there, his expression carefully neutral though his eyes twinkled with knowing amusement. "Sorry to interrupt, boss, but the sheriff's here. Wants to take statements about what happened." Zachary nodded, reluctantly releasing Abigail though he kept one hand at the small of her back. "We'll be right there." After Hank withdrew, Zachary turned to Abigail once more. "This isn't how I planned to tell you how I feel," he said ruefully. "I had something more romantic in mind than the aftermath of an outlaw attack." She laughed softly, the sound like music after the tension of the evening. "I think it's perfectly fitting for the Wild West, don't you?" His answering smile was tender. "I suppose it is. But when this is over, when Callahan and his men are safely in jail, we're going to have a proper conversation about our future, because I want one with you, Abigail, a long one." "I want that too," she replied simply. Hand in hand, they walked out to meet Sheriff Blake. ready to face whatever came next together. The aftermath of Callahan's attack kept Thornhill Ranch in turmoil for several days. Sheriff Blake took Wade Callahan and his 2 accomplices into custody, charging them with attempted murder, arson, and conspiracy to commit cattle rustling. The damage to the barn was minimal thanks to the quick action of the ranch hands, and Jimmy's wound proved to be superficial, requiring only cleaning and bandaging throughout it all. Abigail remained by Zachary's side, their new understanding a steady anchor amid the chaos. They hadn't discussed their feelings further there, simply hadn't been time. But the change in their relationship was evident to everyone. Hank and the other ranch hands exchanged knowing glances when Zachary's hand lingered on Abigail's shoulder, or when she prepared his coffee exactly as he liked it without being asked. A week after the attack, normalcy began to return to the ranch. The heightened security measures were relaxed, and the daily rhythms of ranch life resumed. Zachary rode out with his men in the mornings and returned in the evenings to find Abigail waiting with dinner and a warm welcome. On a particularly beautiful evening in early July, Zachary returned earlier than usual. Abigail was in the kitchen garden, harvesting vegetables for dinner, when she heard the approach of his horse. "You're back early," she said with a smile as he dismounted. "I had a good reason to hurry home," he replied, his eyes warm as they took in her sun-kissed face and the basket of vegetables at her feet. "Are you very busy right now?" "Nothing that can't wait." "Why?" "I thought we might take that ride I promised you when you first arrived." "There's something I want to show you." Intrigued, Abigail set aside her basket. "Let me change quickly." When she returned, Zachary had saddled 2 horses, his chestnut stallion and a gentle mare he kept for occasional visitors. He helped her mount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. They rode west across Thornhill land, through meadows dotted with wildflowers and alongside the creek that had nearly flooded during the storm. Zachary pointed out features of the property as they went where he planned to build a new fence line. The stand of trees that provided the best shelter for calving season, the rocky outcropping that offered the finest view of the sunset. As they crested a gentle hill, a small cabin came into view. It was well built but simple, with a covered porch and windows that gleamed in the late afternoon sun. "What is this place?" Abigail asked as they dismounted. "I built it when I first came to Montana," Zachary explained, leading her toward the cabin. "Lived here while the main house was being constructed. Elizabeth used it as a retreat, sometimes said it was her thinking place." He opened the door, revealing a cozy interior with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, a table with 2 chairs, and a curtained-off sleeping alcove. Everything was clean and well-maintained, though it clearly hadn't been occupied recently. "It's lovely," Abigail said, running her hand along the smooth wooden table. "So peaceful. I thought you might like it." Zachary moved to stand beside her, his expression suddenly serious. "Abigail, there's something I need to ask you." Her heart quickened at his tone. "Yes. When you first came to Thornhill Ranch, I told you I wanted someone to stay and fill my house. I didn't realize then what I was really asking for." He took her hands in his. "I've come to care for you deeply more than I thought possible after losing Elizabeth. You've brought life back to my home and to me." Abigail's eyes filled with tears. "Zachary, please, let me finish," he said gently. "I know this is sudden. We've known each other only a few months. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "Abigail Foster, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small diamond flanked by 2 sapphires. "It was my mother's," he explained. "Elizabeth kept it safe for me, said I'd know when the time was right to give it to someone." Abigail stared at the ring, then at Zachary's hopeful face. "Are you certain?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I came to you with nothing, no family, no dowry, not even decent clothes." "You came with everything that matters," he corrected firmly. Courage, intelligence, compassion, you rebuilt my home and my heart." His expression softened. "I love you, Abigail. I don't need anything from you except your love in return if you can give it." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I love you too," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "So much. Yes, Zachary. Yes, I'll marry you." His face transformed with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he was kissing her, lifting her off her feet in his enthusiasm, both of them laughing and crying at once. When he finally set her down, Abigail looked around the cabin with new understanding. "Is this why you brought me here? To propose?" "Partly," he admitted with a smile. "But also because I wanted to offer you a choice. We can live in the main house, of course. But if you'd prefer something that's truly ours, not shaped by memories of Elizabeth, we could make this our home instead, or build something new entirely." The thoughtfulness of his offer touched her deeply. "The main house is our home," she said confidently. "It's where we found each other. Elizabeth's memory is part of what makes it special, not something to avoid." Relief and gratitude filled his expression. "I hoped you'd feel that way. Though we could still use this place occasionally when we want to escape the demands of the ranch for a while." "I'd like that," she agreed, imagining peaceful evenings by the fire, just the two of them. "There's one more thing," Zachary said, his arms still around her waist. "I spoke to the school board yesterday. They're very interested in meeting you. The town is growing rapidly and they need another teacher desperately. If you still want to pursue that dream." "You remembered," she said, touched by his consideration. "Of course I did. You could teach during the day and still manage our home. We'd hire help for the bigger tasks." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I want you to have everything you've ever dreamed of, Abigail." "I already do," she replied softly, rising on tiptoe to kiss him again. "But I would love to teach. Thank you for making it possible." They stayed at the cabin until dusk, planning their future together. Zachary wanted a simple wedding. "Soon I've waited long enough to make you my wife," he declared. Abigail agreed, having no family to consider and no desire for elaborate celebrations. As they rode back to the main house in the gathering twilight, Abigail felt a profound sense of rightness. She had traveled 2,000 miles, lost everything, and found herself at the mercy of strangers. Yet somehow, improbably, she had found her home and her heart's companion in this wild, beautiful country. "What are you thinking?" Zachary asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "That sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what you truly need," she replied honestly. He reached across the space between their horses to take her hand. "Then I'm grateful for whatever circumstances brought you to my door that day. Even though all I offered was to clean your house," she teased. His smile was warm in the fading light. "Especially that. Because I got exactly what I asked for in return, someone to stay and fill it with love." 3 weeks later, on a perfect summer morning, Abigail Foster became Abigail Thornhill in a simple ceremony at Copper Creek's small church. The entire town turned out for the event, along with ranchers from neighboring properties. Sheriff Blake stood as Zachary's best man, while Margaret Peterson, who had become a dear friend, attended Abigail. The bride wore a new dress of pale blue silk, ordered specially from Denver, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers gathered from the hills around Thornhill Ranch. The groom could scarcely take his eyes off her as they spoke their vows, his voice steady and sure as he promised to love and cherish her all the days of his life. Afterward, the celebration moved to Thornhill Ranch, where tables had been set up in the yard and the bunkhouse cook had prepared a feast. Music, dancing, and laughter filled the air as the community celebrated not just a wedding, but the healing of a man many had feared would never recover from his losses. As the afternoon waned, Abigail found herself standing on the porch, watching the festivities with a full heart. Zachary appeared at her side, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Thornhill," he said, offering her one of the glasses. The name still sent a thrill through her. "I was just thinking how fortunate I am," she replied, accepting the champagne. "A few months ago, I had nothing. Now I have everything." "As do I." He clinked his glass against hers. "To new beginnings." "To filling our house," she countered with a smile, his eyes darkened with meaning. "Speaking of which, I think we've fulfilled our social obligations." "What would you say to slipping away early?" Heat bloomed in Abigail's cheeks, but she nodded agreement. With discreet farewells to key guests, they retreated to the house that was now truly their home. Later, as twilight deepened into night and the sounds of celebration gradually faded, Abigail lay in Zachary's arms, her head pillowed on his chest. The intimacy they had shared had been everything she had hoped for: tender, passionate, a physical expression of the love that had grown between them. "Happy," Zachary murmured, his fingers trailing lazily through her unbound hair. "Completely," she assured him, pressing a kiss to his shoulder. "And you, more than I ever thought possible." He tightened his arms around her. "I want to give you everything, Abigail, everything you deserve." "You already have." She raised herself on one elbow to look at him in the moonlight streaming through the window. "But there is one thing I hope for in the future. Name it, and it's yours." She smiled, tracing the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "Children. A family of our own to fill this house even more completely." His expression softened with tenderness. "Nothing would make me happier. Sons with your courage and daughters with your spirit. Or daughters with your determination and sons with your kindness," she countered. "Either way," he agreed, pulling her down for a kiss. "We'll start trying right away." She laughed against his lips. "We already have." Their first child, a daughter they named Elizabeth Margaret Thornhill, arrived the following spring, healthy and strong with her father's blue eyes and her mother's auburn hair. Zachary proved to be a devoted father, as tender with his infant daughter as he was confident with his ranch hands. By then, Abigail had taken up her position at the Copper Creek School, teaching 3 days a week, while a young woman from town helped with the household chores. The arrangement worked perfectly, allowing her to pursue her passion for education while still managing their home. Little Elizabeth was joined 2 years later by a brother, James Zachary Thornhill, who arrived during one of Montana's infamous blizzards. Zachary himself delivered the baby when the doctor couldn't reach them through the snow-choked roads, following Abigail's calm instructions with shaking hands. "You were magnificent," he told her afterward, cradling his newborn son while their daughter peered curiously at her brother from the edge of the bed. "We both were," Abigail replied with a tired smile. "Our family is complete now, but fate had other plans." 3 years later, twins, another boy and girl named Thomas and Grace, joined the Thornhill family, bringing the total to 4 children under the age of 6. The house that had once seemed so empty now overflowed with noise, laughter, and the controlled chaos that comes with a large family. Through it all, Zachary and Abigail's love for each other only deepened. They faced the challenges of ranching life together: droughts, harsh winters, fluctuating cattle prices, with the same strength and determination that had brought them through their early trials. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary surprised Abigail with a trip to the cabin where he had proposed. The children were left in the capable hands of Hank's wife, who had joined him at the ranch 5 years earlier, giving them a rare night alone together. "Do you remember the first time I brought you here?" Zachary asked as they sat on the cabin's porch, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in spectacular hues. "Of course," Abigail replied, her head resting on his shoulder. "I was so surprised when you proposed. I thought perhaps you were going to offer me the teaching position, not your heart." He chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I'd given you my heart long before that day. I just needed to find the courage to tell you. And now look at us," she mused. 10 years, 4 children, and a life I couldn't have imagined when I first arrived at Thornhill Ranch. "Any regrets?" he asked, a teasing note in his voice though his eyes held a hint of genuine question. "Not one," she assured him firmly. "Though I do sometimes miss the peace and quiet of those early days. Hence our escape tonight," he reminded her with a smile. Just the two of us, like it was in the beginning. Not quite like the beginning, she corrected, turning to face him fully. I have something to tell you, Zachary. Something I've suspected for a few weeks, but confirmed just yesterday. His expression turned curious. What is it? She took his hand and placed it gently over her stomach. We're going to have another baby, in the winter. For a moment, he simply stared at her, processing her words. Then joy broke across his face like sunrise. Another child, truly, she nodded, laughing as he pulled her into his arms with a whoop of delight. I thought 4 might be enough, she admitted when he finally released her. But it seems God has other plans for our family. 5 is a good, round number, Zachary declared, his hand returning to rest protectively over her still flat stomach. Though if you'd prefer this to be the last. Let's see how we manage with 5 before making any decisions, she suggested wisely. Between the ranch, the school, and our growing brood, we have our hands quite full already. He nodded agreement, then kissed her with all the tenderness of their first embrace. I love you, Abigail Thornhill. More today than I did 10 years ago, and I expect to love you even more 10 years from now. And I love you, she replied softly, for giving me a home, a family, and a life beyond anything I could have dreamed. As darkness fell and stars appeared one by one in the vast Montana sky, they remained on the porch, talking of their past and planning their future. The journey that had begun with a desperate young woman offering to clean a lonely rancher's house had led them here to a love that had indeed filled that house to overflowing. And as they finally retired to the cabin's simple bed, secure in each other's arms and in the life they had built together, both knew with absolute certainty that they had found that rarest of treasures. A love as enduring as the mountains that surrounded them, as vast as the prairie that stretched before them, and as life-giving as the land they called home.